Here we have Tim Dillon declaring MAGA is dead. Let's go ahead and take a look and watch and react.
Vance knows that MAGA is ending. The MAGA movement, the party that Donald Trump threw when he walked down the escalator, is ending. And I think it ended with that UFC fight. I think that was the last party MAGA was going to throw. You had motocross, you had UFC fights. That was a fun party, but it's the final. I think it's the final party. As a cultural force, that was the most fun. It's not going to get more fun than that. Take a look at that. Take a look at this. Is it going to get more fun than that? You've got the flyover. Yeah, there it is. This is it. You're not going to top this as a party goes. You are not going to top UFC on the White House lawn. For the die-hard MAGA people, this is what they got. But they don't know it yet. Our vice president is out on the podcast circuit with a new book called God Chose Me. And it's about J.D. Vance being selected by an omniscient God to lead our country. I think from what I understand in the book, and I haven't read it, I have not read it. From what I understand in the book, God appears to J.D. Vance in the White House and tells J.D. Vance, you got to go along with the Iran stuff up until they have some kind of deal, and then you could kind of start distancing yourself from Trump before the midterms. And you have to, at that point, release a book about your finding your way back to faith. And here are the podcasts you should go on. When you were out on your book tour and you were trying to rebrand, you're going to have to come out and say that, of course Iran has the right to defend itself. So take it away. This is J.D. Vance speaking as a mouthpiece for the Lord, I believe.
So apparently, Tim Dillon had asked JD Vance to go back onto his podcast and refused or didn't get back to him. And it's pretty obvious why. I mean, Tim Dillon, at the very least, is not so blind as to, not see the obvious reality and pointed out right there very, very clearly that you have a bunch of people in government right now in terms of the president, the vice president, secretaries of state, down the line that they have absolutely no idea what they're doing. They are taking marching orders from, the Mark Levins and, the Israel lobby, AIPAC, Benjamin Netanyahu, and all these things. And they basically outsourced their foreign policy to them and said, hey, you guys got all these great, bright ideas for how we're going to take out Iran. This rogue regime that's hell bent on dropping nukes all over the world, even though there's been no evidence of that at all whatsoever. And they just go ahead and decide, look, we were successful in Venezuela. In our, one night overnight operation where they had to, defeat like 40, ex-Cuban, prisoners that they had stationed outside of Maduro's palace that, I don't know, for whatever reason, we were setting up a full tactical military unit, naval unit in the Caribbean, and they didn't decide to, tighten up security. So anyway, but that's the, Venezuela's problem. And things haven't gotten better in Venezuela anyway, by the way. So, and that's coming from Venezuelan people. So they had success kidnapping Maduro and his wife and taking them to a prison in New York City. And they thought, wow, that was so successful. The Israel lobby is telling us we can do the exact same thing in Iran. We'll take out their leader, we'll take out the regime, we'll go in, we'll move a couple of chess pieces around and bada bing, bada boom. They won't have a nuke. We'll have a new regime. Everyone will be happy, and Israel will stop bombing and terrorizing and harassing the Middle East, and everything will finally go back to, or will finally be peaceful in the Middle East. If we continue doing the same, terrorism and meddling and overthrowing regimes that we've been doing for the last 40 years, that's just led to more destabilization. We'll just keep doing the same thing and then things will get better somehow. Well, anyway, apparently not. So obviously that is not what has happened. Iran had one singular chess piece, and that was shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. They were able to do that very successfully. And we have had no response. And Trump is even going out there and admitting that if we let this thing go on, that it's going to lead to energy shortages. The price of oil and gas already had doubled during the short period that this conflict has had been going on. That things were going to go worse, get worse, and turn into some kind of a global crisis, crash the international economy, lead to some kind of a depression, and who knows what else. And you just don't have any options. So you're Trump, and you have to now make a deal that's worse than the deal that Obama got in terms of the Iran nuclear deal that he had that Trump pulled out of because it was such a disastrous deal. It's a terrible deal. Um, Giving Iran the same amount of money, if not more, of their own money back, sanctions relief, reparations, and the whole nine yards. And here we are as a global economy, as a global Western economy, looking weaker. We weren't able to defeat, this, regime that had its head chopped off, essentially, that with one simple chess move, were able to defeat the American empire in like a 2 month span. And now you have this petulant Israel that is still bombing in southern Lebanon and stomping its feet and trying to demand that the U.S. continue these rampant, unnecessary, never-ending wars, continuing to drain our life force and crippling our empire. And Donald Trump has been going along with it all the way. At least now, seemingly pivoting and going in another direction, which obviously is necessary at this point, because if not, you're looking at all those terrible things that I just mentioned. Um, and what can you expect if you are a MAGA fan at this point? You have Donald Trump. He is now heading into his 6th out of 8 years of being president. Right, we're almost, we're definitely a year and several months in to his second term. We're heading up to the midterms. If he had not gotten out of Iran, these negotiations are still ongoing. But if he had continued along this way, it would be absolutely unmitigated bloodbath, the likes of which you never see in the midterms. Probably still is going to be. I suspect that it will be as much. That Democrats will definitely take over the House, probably take over in the Senate, although that's much more 50-50 because the Republicans have a very strong institutional and just sort of like an electoral map advantage heading into that. Into the midterms. But either way, you take away the House from them, at least you get rid of sort of their ability to pass these reconciliation packages where they can stuff in a bunch of, crazy shit, these mad tax cuts for the rich, deregulation, rampant amounts of money that go straight to the military industrial complex, and which a lot of which goes unaccounted for. Etc. So, you can rein that in. Trump is, heading into his lame duck period. He looks ill. He looks sick. He looks fat and bloated. He's got, veins exploding all over his hands and bodies, and his heart is probably failing at this point. So, we wish him well, but he doesn't look good. He's falling asleep, at the fucking NBA finals and things like that, where it's supposed to be like an exciting and animating event. Man can't keep his eyes open. So is MAGA dead? Absolutely. I would say Tim Dillon is spot on. And the question is what comes next? So you have people like Nick Fuentes, maybe like the Tucker Carlson, Dave Smith, Thomas Massey, like these outsiders, the people that are rejecting the core MAGA movement. But the question is like, who do the Trump people then turn to? Are they going to go and pivot to the, extremes with like Nick Fuentes and his style? Do they coalesce back around Tucker, Candace, or do they just go right to, like your Marco Rubio, Don Jr. type of a candidate, which at this point are governing more like an extreme neocon, like a George Bush type on steroids, basically. So do the Republican voters want that? Or like, are they just going to go for whoever Trump, their cult leader, picks? And if that's the case, then they're probably fucked because you are going to have a massive split between the Republican, online outsiders, the Candace Owens, now the Tucker Carlsons, Nick Fuentes is sort of the biggest one of them all. And then whoever Trump just sort of, taps to be the next person in line. And who are people going to, coalesce behind, or who's going to sort of be able to steer the party, the Republican movement. That is a massive opportunity for Democrats while the right is trying to figure that out, while Trump is throwing bombs, while Nick Fuentes is throwing bombs, again, metaphorically, and actually, literally in the case of Trump. But, what's going to happen with that? I don't think they really are going to have a strong showing in 2028. At least that's not how it looks at the moment. Things are looking bleak for that movement. And it is a fantastic opportunity for a Democrat, a Mamdani-esque Democrat, because obviously Mamdani can't run because he's not a natural born citizen, unfortunately, but somebody that is charismatic, that can communicate, that is young, that's energetic, that has the right policy ideas, that sees the problems in the country, the corruption, the inequality, the corrupt, billionaire class that is trying to basically steer this thing off of a, AI driven, dystopian cliff. They talk all this big game about, we're gonna, you're not gonna have to work. We're gonna have universal, exceptional income. Everyone's gonna be, have $1 million in the bank or whatever. We don't even have, basic childcare. We don't even have basic, public education, or at least university level education. We don't have healthcare taken care of. And you guys are talking about like universal basic income. Like, give me a fucking break. We're not anywhere close to that. And you guys don't want that anyway, because you're lobbying for the opposite. You guys all lined up behind the guy that's doing the exact opposite. So, yeah, we need big time reform. We need to figure this thing out. We need to figure it out quickly. So, anyway, that is Tim Dillon. Those are some of my thoughts on the state of things right now. Trump, MAGA being dead as a movement, seeming to be the case. I would agree with that, with what Tim Dillon says. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll check in with you guys next time.